Good afternoon. This is Doug Holder. I'm with Poet to Poet, Writer to Writer, with my guest Gene Monahan, poet and
DVD.
poet and writer, website manager, mother, many things. But I'm going to read a brief bio of Jean. She grew up in a town, Connecticut, and graduated from Bates College in Maine, and she migrated to Boston later, and she's worked there. She's lived there for a while. Now lives in Salem, Mass, and went to Harvard at night for a while, and then went to the creative writing program at Columbia University. And she's the author of 3 books of poetry: Hands, Believe It or Not, and Mauled Illusionist. And she taught English in China, and she traveled widely, and she taught poetry at MIT. And she's an accomplished poet and writer. In your manuscript that you gave me, pomegranate, there's blueberries, there's raspberries, there's grapes, and there's pomegranates. I mean, what is it about fruit that's sort of, it's like a fruit bowl of a poetry book, right?
Probably because I'm a fruitcake. I think that I have always liked sometimes to use inanimate objects and just kind of let them speak for themselves.
Right.
And something like a pomegranate, it turns out when I did a little bit of research, has so many references historically.
Yeah.
In fact, one thing I read was that people consider it having been possibly what was in the Garden of Eden.
Oh, wow.
And
the
then
root of all evil.
Yeah, the root of all evil. And then, of course, with all of its seeds inside, it looks like a galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
It's, fruit, of course, is obviously, can be pretty metaphorical. But, yeah, it just happened that when I was working on this manuscript that I realized I had a number of...
Fruit poems?
A lot of things having to do with food.
Yeah, I like
Yeah.
food also. Food is very evocative, I think.
Very evocative. So, yeah, and I think, and fruit does have a lot of associations for readers as well. So it's not just my own, but as people read it.
There's one poem where the guy didn't harvest his grapes. He just let them on the vine.
Yes.
Is that true?
Yeah, that's as we say, true. I have lived in Salem for about 12 years, and one of my neighbors actually has 2 things of fruit that he never
Right.
works with, which is great for me.
Right.
He has a fence, and over it spills all these Concord grapes.
Oh, wow.
And then he also has a row of rhubarb, and he never harvests it.
Is there a philosophy behind that, or just that? Have you talked to him about that?
Well, yeah, and I've asked his permission, and every year
Yeah.
I eat the food. But of course, the Concord grapes, on a couple of levels, because the wonderful smell that was wafting over the fence, and then I immediately associated with Aesop's fox,
Fables, yeah.
the fables, and the fox that's sitting there desiring the low-hanging, and as we say, the low-hanging fruit. So, yeah, so it's always interesting to me when something is bearing fruit and nobody's there to harvest it.
Yeah.
It's sort of begging. A, to be eaten, and second, to be written about.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you seem to, when you were in East Cambridge, you had a small room where you worked, and
Yeah.
now you have a nice study in Salem. And, we always talk, Virginia Woolf said a room of one's own. I mean,
Yes.
how important is that? I mean, I like coffee shops. I can't work in a room in my house.
I
have
see.
to be. I have to be out in coffee shops and things. How does it
Yeah.
work for you?
Yeah, that's interesting, because there are so many different ways that
Yeah.
people work, and so you must derive a lot from the just social interaction and watching people and
I like the white noise.
the white noise and bring the environment in. I'm more that when I am able to write, I have to be more in a meditative state. So I actually need quiet.
Okay.
I need, if preferably, absolute quiet.
Right.
But that's not always possible. But in fact, when I used to be in the East Cambridge apartment, I suppose I probably did things like turn on a fan or something to create that noise.
Yeah, a little buzz.
Yeah. So, and as I don't know about for you, but writing can be so excruciating, and so you really
At
need,
times,
yeah,
yeah.
at times. So you really need to be able to eliminate distractions, or at least I do.
Right.
And just focus. Yeah, the room I have now is wonderful because it's a lot bigger than my little tiny alcove that I had. But it's I'm less focused now than I used to be in those days, just because my life's different.
Your life's different.
Yeah.
You know, as a poet friend of mine, Miriam Levine, I don't know if you know her, and she wrote a book on poets in their rooms.
Mm-hmm.
Did also a book on that.
Yeah.
I forget the name of it.
There was also and I'm going to forget the photographer. There was a photographer, I think in the 70s, did a series of photographs of writers in their rooms.
Oh, wow.
And I'll think of it later, perhaps who the photographer was. But it is always interesting to see where people work.
Absolutely. Some do their best work on the toilet. I mean, yeah.
Who knows?
Now, do you believe that? Well, actually, almost. I was going to say that you almost answered that. I guess you believe that writing poetry is a form of meditation.
Yes.
You know, I mean, is it?
Yeah.
I mean, do you need to meditate also after?
I don't actually meditate in my life, but I find that if I am really writing a poem,
right,
inevitably if it's actually going to work as a poem, inevitably I will get myself into a kind of state where it's really coming out of the unconscious more than conscious. And that's very hard to do. In fact, I find that since I haven't been writing a lot in the last few years, it's harder to get into that space.
State, yeah.
Yeah, because in back when I was writing regularly, I would know that I had achieved, that the poem was really starting to go somewhere when I didn't know for sure what was going to come next.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah. And so, you know, sometimes when you just have that blank page and you just write something and start.
Yeah.
You start.
You could do that too, yeah. I always found that when things were going along and I had plenty of ideas, I would actually have 3 or 4 ideas in the pocket. So I would just work on those.
You carry a little pocketbook with you?
I did then, yeah. Now it's more of a list.
Grocery list.
Grocery list at the table, yeah. But when you get those ideas, you got to grab them. Is that what you do too?
Yeah, you got to go with it.
Just
You got to go with it while they're hot. Get them when they're hot, as the saying goes. You went to Columbia, MFA, right?
I did, yeah.
You know, I interviewed another poet. Probably, I don't know. She was there in the her 80s or early 80s or something. And her name is Ava Saltzman. Does she?
Yeah, that name. I think I know her. That name sounds familiar.
She's in London now. She's in Britain.
Yeah.
But anyway, she studied with a lot of very interesting people. So I was interested to ask you, who did you study with at Columbia?
I had Pamela White-Hadass and Richard Howard.
Richard Howard. Wow.
Yeah, was there. The poet I was there very briefly, and then she left. A.I. that poet. She and let's see. Tom Lux was there just briefly. He didn't. A lot of these people would come in just for maybe a week or so, and then we would have the regulars. Bill Matthews was great, and he was there. I had him for a whole semester.
Okay.
He was wonderful. And then other people they would just bring in, again in a very short-lived way, but for just a couple of days maybe, including wonderfully Milosh came through. There's probably lots and lots of people I'm forgetting, but Dan Halpern was running the program at the time, so he would teach classes. It was, I mean, pretty uniformly the stuff I learned there was great. I mean, the environment was very stimulating, very competitive.
Yeah, I mean, people. I was going to ask you about the MFA. I mean, you know, people say it's Mills now and all that, but you know, I was asking a lot of people. Some who went to Iowa and all the other really good ones, and they said the teaching's great and everything, but the most thing was time. This time that you can be away and within the company of writers. This sort of, this environment.
Yeah, it was wonderful because a lot of the people that were in the program had done the normal thing, which is you get a degree in English. And I hadn't done that. I actually got my degree in psychology. So there were a lot of conventions and understandings about writing that I didn't have. So in a way that helped me because I wasn't overly...
Preconceived.
Yeah, I wasn't preconceived. I wasn't overly influenced by some of those notions. And yet, there were a lot of things I needed to know that I didn't know, which is of course still the case today. But
it never ends.
never ends. But in particular about writing and about form and about all that stuff. Molly Peacock was a big influence.
Wow.
Molly and Bill Matthews and Richard Howard and
that's quite a lineup.
It was something to be able to meet those people and work with those
Right.
people. Absolutely.